Yeah. Thank you for everybody coming out. How many of you have heard of the OSU Open Source Lab before? Okay, so a lot of you have. So hopefully I wanted to kind of go over the summary of what we're going to go over in this session, mostly because I want to make sure you understand how I'm going to structure this. It's going to be kind of like a story for me. Kind of like we had a plan and this is what we did and this is all the things that you probably shouldn't do that we did, and hopefully you can learn something out of it. And this doesn't cover just like the specific configuration systems that we're moving from and to. It kind of applies to any kind of environment. Just kind of making sure you don't do that. So there's a lot of various things going on. But first I want to talk about the team environment, because that really plays a lot into what's happening. For those of you that don't know what the OSU Open Source Lab does, we provide infrastructure hosting for a lot of high-impact open source projects. So the big guys like the Linux Foundation, the Apache Software Foundation, Drupal, just to name a few. We have 150 other projects that we host in some capacity. And it ranges from hands-on, we're managing all of the infrastructure, to hands-off, they're doing everything, and we're just smart hands. So we have a really wide range of systems. We don't manage everything. And we kind of have to tailor fit everything for every project. So we're not like a normal hosting facility where everything is homogeneous, and we have to stick to that. And we're also primarily driven by student sysadmins and developers. So there's only 2 full-time sysadmins, 1 full-time developer, and then the rest of them are students. So that creates some interesting problems for us, where we have a lot of productivity problems. Whether it's during the school year with school, we don't know quite when they're going to be there, reliability, they only maybe have 2 hours a day to work on something. Any of you in higher education that have student workers like that completely understand what I'm talking about. And then you also have to deal with turnover. We're lucky if we have a student for 2 years. So there's that constant battle of teaching people everything all the time. And we always have some kind of ongoing project going on that we have to keep maintaining. And we always have new tickets coming in that we have to maintain. And then I've been at the lab for 6 years, over 6 years now, and I was the primary sysadmin for most of those years, and I did do the best job of documenting everything. So a lot of that domain knowledge of like, why did we do it this way come down to me, and I have to be there to kind of help them through it. So that kind of gives you an overview of what we do at the lab. Here's some of the systems guys. In our weekly meeting, we kind of go over stuff, just to give you a view. So let me kind of go over our systems history so you can kind of get some more background. Before I started, we started out using Debian for a lot of things. And then around 2005, a lot of the students at the time, Gentoo was the rage, started running Gentoo Harden. And we did that mostly because we wanted to have the hardened features that we could do easily with GR security and PAX, which is kind of built into the Gentoo Harden environment. That works really great until you try to scale it, and then everybody that knows how to manage a Gentoo system leaves or gets in management like me, and I don't have time to deal with it. And so a lot of why the issues we had was kind of stemming from that. We started deploying CentOS initially, just as a test, because we were kind of knowing that we're going to have a problem. And right now most of our new deployments are CentOS 6. And we could have gone to Debian or Ubuntu, but it boiled down to we had already started doing CentOS. Why do we want to have a 3rd operating system we have to now deal with? We had a lot of connections with the CentOS project. We already have, obviously, with Debian, but it just worked really well for us. And the EO end-of-life schedule really worked well for us. So right now we've been using CFengine 2, I think 2.2, for ages and ages. And right now we kind of have a mixed environment of CFengine and some Puppet. We're still working on the migration, but I'll kind of go over that a little bit more. Now, talk about our CFengine environment. I don't know how many of you have ever used CFengine, but we basically use it to do everything, or we have. We have a lot of various service classes that we've created, a lot of various package classes that are kind of like the same thing in Puppet. We have a lot of code. I just updated this from the last time I did this at PuppetConf. And the really crazy one for me is how many commits in that repo are just from me over the last 6 years or so. So there's a lot of history in that repo and how we've done things, and so there's a lot of, how do we decouple that into migrating it to Puppet over the years? There's a lot of like, well, maybe we don't need to do it this way because we had to do it this stupid way that CFengine made us do it. So you kind of have to decouple that. And so with this in CFengine environment, we basically say we do everything in CFengine if we can. There's some things that we just can't do very easily, but we try to make it work. There's a lot of crazy, stupid logic in our CFengine code that we probably shouldn't be doing, but it works for what we need, which makes it really difficult for some of our newer students to really understand, oh, this is how this works, and this is really different. And they don't quite catch it, and so mistakes are made. It's not really dynamic for what we needed. You know, we live now on a Web 2.0 world, and we can't really do what we need to do with CFengine. We wanted to have some easy way of delegating access to projects so that we didn't have to manage everything. They could do it. And with CFengine, we really couldn't do that easily. Of course, there's CFengine 3, which has made a lot of improvements. But looking at the upgrade path, it was going to be just as much work to do that versus Puppet or Chef or whatever. So we decided not to really do that. And I really felt like Puppet was kind of the way we wanted to go. And for now, the way we have CFengine set up, it actually works pretty well with Gentoo hosts. So that worked really well. So why did we choose to go towards Puppet? Well, we really like the goals of the community and the project itself and kind of how it's grown over the years. Whenever I pick a project or some kind of service that we want to use for our services, I always take a look at that community and see how that's progressed over the years. We don't want to use a product or a project that maybe you don't know if it's going to be around or it's going to have any innovation in it. The other thing, obviously, is because Puppet Labs is just up the road from us. So it's a nice proximity. So if we ever have issues, we can, directly talk to the folks doing it. There's a lot of shareable modules in code, and that's really, grown over the years. When we started, there wasn't that many, but now there's been quite a bit more. And the thing that I always liked about Puppet is that it's very sysadmin focused. That can be good and bad, depending on what side you want to go with, but I felt like it's really important for us because basically what we do is mostly sysadmin related things, but we also do a lot of development. And I really like the progress of all the various features and products that come out of it. Like Razor really excites me right now. I feel like it's getting really to a point that we can probably play with it because we have a horrible time doing physical machines installs. It takes way too long to have our students go through that. Taking a look at Puppet Enterprise and Foreman and other things like that. Like there's a lot of various products and third-party projects that really extend Puppet. So that was really important. So what was our strategy? We wanted to avoid mixing our CFengine and Puppet environments at all costs. Of course, that didn't happen, but that was the goal. And the other idea was converting all of the CentOS hosts first, because it was much easier to transition. The Gentoo hosts were we try to keep them in the same state as we can, but obviously we can't guarantee that everywhere. We also took this opportunity to rebuild, retire, and rethink our entire architecture. So completely taking Gentoo out of our system and just using CentOS to keep something really simple for us to manage. And we've been doing a lot of the same basic architecture since we originally got things going in 2005. So we've never really had time to rethink like, well, maybe we should do it this way and that's how everybody else is doing it now. And so it's kind of like we're doing all this stuff all at the same time, which just takes up a lot of time. So in the beginning, we started doing this in about 2010. We kind of had a summer plan where we were going to try and do this. And as all things, it starts out as a student project because at the time, I was probably busy doing other things and I couldn't do it myself. And so we started out using code from example 42 at the time, which worked out really well. And you'll notice that I have a number on the Git repo because we have many incarnations of this repo through the progression of our migration. So we decided we'll just do one single repo and just go with it. The one thing we found out initially, and this was before we decided to completely start ditching Gentoo, was that Puppet really didn't understand Gentoo. There's a couple of modules out there that kind of understood it, but the whole use flag philosophy just did not work really well with the dependency tree of Puppet. So it made it really difficult to kind of do the same thing we were doing in CFengine with Puppet. And so that really held us back quite a bit in the beginnings. And then after that, later in the year, we created a second repository. And so we decided, well, we want to do this whole delegation thing. So maybe we'll create repositories based on projects and then do some symlinking to kind of make the manifest and the module folder all kind of work out. And it did solve the delegation problem, but we ended up having the manifest go in a really ugly way. At the time, I heard so many horror stories about submodules, Git submodules, that I avoided it. And I basically just created a really simple script that just kind of kept everything in sync, and it was kind of ad hoc. It was not really a standard way of dealing with it, but it worked. The sad thing is that this repo is still in production today. What ended up happening is the Drupal project, historically we managed everything with the Drupal project. But as they grew, they kind of outgrew what we could do for them. And their volunteer infrastructure group grew to the point that they actually could start doing stuff on their own, and we didn't have to do everything. And so we reluctantly said, well, we'll do this with, you can do the stuff with Puppet, basically application layer stuff, and we'll keep doing stuff, the basic OS stuff in CFengine, and see how that goes. And it works for now, but yeah, we run into issues sometimes. It's not pretty. Hopefully we'll get away from this at some point, but it's working out for them so far. And so the following summer, the students were like, we need to redo this. And this is the one that I kind of let them just kind of go on their own, just kind of really see what they could do. And so repository number 3 we created. And we kind of partnered with some folks up at Portland State University that kind of were doing similar things, but for a university department. And they kind of had this repo situation as well. And so the idea was, well, for every module, we're going to have a repository, and we'll have submodule everything. And then we had this crazy system that would like merge everything and like do tests, and it was a nightmare. I mean, it was nice for having everything segmented out, but it was way too complicated, especially for the newer students, because every commit you made, you had to do the top commit and update the submodules and everything. As a test, we deployed it on our student workstations, we had just switched from, sysadmin installs, does whatever he wants, and every sysadmin person has their own specific workstation to a shared workstation environment. So this repository kind of made that happen. It's kind of like, well, we'll use this as a test because it's not touching production, so to speak, so we'll try it out. So they deployed it, and we ran it for about a year and a half. So that's the second instance at this particular time we have running in production, so to speak. So things are getting a little hairy and crazy. So at that point, the Portland State guys had created some really cool stuff like the Puppet Sync module, which you probably should check out. It synchronizes your manifests in a really sane way, and also if you want to do environments and stuff. But we also added the basic, syntax checking, the lint checking, and things like that. But yeah, the submodules had so much rage face at the time. It was just really horrible. And so next summer I decided, well, I'll try and fix this and try to come up with some better way. I created another repository. I was still using submodules, but I cut it down a lot. I tried to refactor a bunch of the code, and then I took a look at a package called MR. It's actually a pretty old application out there, but it basically does repository management for every kind of repository software you can think of. So you want to have like a SVN checkout with a Git checkout below it, and it does it. But it's kind of an old school way of doing it. It probably would have worked, but this repository never went into production, and it was kind of forgotten by the students when they tried to do the next refactor. So thankfully, we didn't put that one in production. Finally, later that year, we're like, let's fix this for real. Let's make it simple. Let's just call it Puppet Simple and make it really simple. And so basically, it's a single repo, but parts of it do have submodules. The parts that have submodules are things like the stuff that we pull in from community repos so that we know exactly what version we want. The intent is eventually we write modules internally inside of the site and dist module area, and then once we feel like it's matured enough, we'll put it out to our public Git repo, and then we'll put it into the submodules. Since we hopefully think it's stable, we don't have to make a lot of changes to it. We haven't really gotten to that point yet, but this is what we switched the workstations to start using at one point. And it works really well for what we need to do. I mean, there's obviously better ways of doing it, but in the end, this is what we ended up with. So to kind of give you a recap of the repository madness we had, we ended up with 5 different repositories, and 2 of them are still in production. So we deprecated the one that we had the workstations originally on, and then we still have the workstations on there. So eventually we're going to move Drupal over to Puppet Simple or something like that for them, and hopefully fix that whole mess and so forth. So kind of lessons from all the repos: keep it simple, stupid from the start. Don't try to do all the things. Probably my whole goal was to try to have an environment where we could have multi-tenants doing commits. And the reality is that's a really hard problem. And if we really wanted to do the migration, we should have just forgotten about that and just went with it and then figured it out later. But unfortunately, that's what held us back for a long time. Submodules, avoid them as much as you can. You may not be able to avoid them at all, but at least try to minimize it. Don't do like a submodule for every single module you have out there, unless it's not going to change much. Pick something, like actually sit down and design and try a few things a little bit, but don't keep refactoring. It's like, well, we'll try this other thing, and then like migrate everything over to it. It would have been nice to like stick to something, but we were trying to do the multi-tenant approach to everything. The flexibility is really great, but you don't need it in the beginning. In the beginning, you just need something that works. And down the road, you can refactor it to make it maybe a little bit more flexible in some capacity. Try to use as many community modules as you can. The Puppet Forge has been great. You can find things at GitHub really easily now. When we started doing this, that was really early in the stages, so it was really hard to find modules that we thought were actually good. But that's considerably changed now. So definitely take a look at the community modules. So this is the fun slide of the whole presentation. So we cited at one point, like, well, hey, we've been fighting with Puppet for so long. A lot of us kind of avoided Chef. But we were like, well, it's been like 5 years since we've taken a look at it. Let's see what it's like. And I'm like, well, yeah, wait, isn't this supposed to be a Puppet migration talk? And it is. But we decided to take a look at Chef. Just, we're agnostic about tools. We like the tool for the right job. We just want to see how it works. And so we started testing it on a few test machines. And it fixes a lot of the weird issues we were having with Puppet with the workflow, but it also creates new ones. And since most of our students have some kind of a developer background, Chef has a little bit strengths in that for us. But as I say, the jury is still out. It seems like there's getting to be more support at the lab to doing more Chef, but I don't think Puppet's going away. And like attending this conference this week, I've been like toying about that whole idea. Like I still want to do stuff with Puppet, but I don't want to have to deal with 3 or 2 different configuration management systems for all the stuff we do. But looking at things like Razor, that seems like a perfect thing. It's not exactly pure Puppet, but that whole package right there, I think, is going to be really important to us. So I don't think we're going to ditch Puppet in any way, but we're definitely taking a look at alternatives. But yeah, yay, right now we have 3 configuration management systems. The worst case scenario. But hey, the good thing about our students, they get to learn about it. They get to see what the differences and the nuances, so that when they move on, they'll kind of know like, hey, I can go to a company and they know about both, basically, So kind of where the current status of the migration is, and it's kind of changed since we've kind of started doing a little bit of Chef stuff. But all the workstations are still Puppet. We're still using the simple repo. We're still working on some base modules, but I think most of it's kind of been delayed because we've been trying out Chef more. But everything for the workstations has worked really well. We're trying to do some refactoring, cleaning, and things like that. We really haven't gotten to the point of migrating our OSL site-specific logic into Puppet, but that wouldn't be too hard to do, and so forth. And just doing more testing and more testing and more testing. And like I say, the testing environment, vagrant and more vagrant, that's really important, as you all probably know. We want to test, we have the CFengine standardized base box, and then run it against Puppet and make sure does everything correctly. We kind of keep adding more modules and trying things out. Definitely getting the RSpec, you should be doing it anyways. I don't think we've done it that much on the current modules we have. We also definitely want to get like a Jenkins CI in place so we can do these sort of tests. And eventually get the project's access stuff sorted out. But like all things, it needs a lot of work. So once we get all the stuff migrated over, we'll have finish all of our base modules. Try to do some application deployments that we want to do with some of our services. So this is if we actually go towards converting everything to Puppet. Try to maybe we'll have each system as a rebuild, or we try moving over services and so forth. And basically convert all the CentOS hosts over to Puppet. And then Gentoo will just go away, which is sad for me because I'm actually a Gentoo developer. And I think it's a really powerful system. So like Core OS is based on Chrome OS, which is Gentoo. So I think that's really cool. But for us, it's not working. And so we're really excited to get everything over to CentOS as quickly as possible. So future plans, publish all the OSL modules that we have. We kind of want to clean them up, get more delegation to projects. We want to definitely take a look at Foreman, because Foreman's really cool. Maybe try out Puppet Enterprise, so we have the hookups up at Puppet Labs. And definitely take a look at PuppetDB and then Collective and Hiera. With the current system that we have right now, we really haven't done that. We haven't had to need to do it, but I think we definitely need to do that moving forward on that environment. So some conclusions on what's going about this whole thing is like, if you're doing this, find someone and have them be like, that's what you're working on for the next 3 months kind of a thing, which is really hard to do. And that way you can kind of maintain consistency. The problem we had is students are great, they're smart, but they go for a summer and then someone else takes up on the project and they have a different take on what they want to do, and it just did not make for a consistent migration strategy. It was too big for a student kind of a project in some capacity. Very much try to keep things as simple as possible. It's really big, really big. Try to think of specific hosts that you have and how they're configured, and try to use those as examples in a conversion. So get your Puppet manifest set up for this, and then okay, let's try this and see how this works. And that way you can try and catch all those various things that happen when you're doing a migration from a different configuration management. And something else we learned in this whole process was the brick and mortar philosophy. So you have all these bricks that are like the little things, like the base modules, like the MySQL module that's on a community module. That's your brick. But the mortar is the OSL specific stuff of how we set up MySQL and all of that. So setting up your classes and your modules in a way that makes sense for that. And that separates everything out. So that if you want to have a module out, a community module of something you made, you pull that out. You pull out your site-specific stuff out of that into somewhere else. So I guess I'm done a little bit early, but questions? Go to the mic, that would be great.
I'm considering migrating from CFengine 2 to Puppet, like what you just said. What was the most challenging parts of migrating from CFengine 2?
What was the most challenging thing of migrating from CFengine to Puppet? I've been a CFengine user for over 10 years now, and it's just how CFengine does its stuff compared to Puppet is completely backwards. So like the classes that you normally use to turn things on and off that you want to do, it's done in the no definition. So like instead of having one file that you can see everything in, it's in the no definition, so it's a little different. I think for me personally, when I was working on this, that was the biggest thing that was kind of weird for me. I was like, oh yeah, that's how you do that. And then the other part was just, all those things you had to do because it was CFengine and you couldn't do dependencies. Suddenly you have to realize, oh, I don't have to worry about that because I can do this in Puppet. And it was kind of like looking back on something and being like, oh, I don't have to do it this way anymore. I can actually do this the correct way, and kind of doing that. Because it's really easy to just be, oh, I want to copy all the files because that's what it is in CFengine. And you can be like, well, I can make this a little more flexible when doing it with templates or things of that nature. So I'd say that's basic takeaway I got from that. Try to pick a service that's really popular, or I wouldn't pick something that that's really complex, maybe like Apache. Apache's pretty complex for us. So pick something like maybe SSH. And like that's a pretty simple thing to kind of try and see how does this go from how I have it set up to CFengine to Puppet. Any other questions or flames?
So you mentioned you have a number of different users, different types of users with different needs. If you're not using Highray yet, are you doing all that statically just in the nodes file? Are you like basically manually configuring everything? Or
Yeah.
some other solution?
Yeah, basically that's what we've been doing. And mainly it's been the Drupal project that's been doing that. And they've basically been doing that because it hasn't been that big yet that they're not managing all of their infrastructure with Puppet yet, so it hasn't been that big of an issue. But yeah, we're definitely to the point that we have to just start doing things in IR or PuppetDB. The problem is that we only have so much time in the summer to do things, and it's difficult to convince a student to work on this, to do that kind of a thing, or more like the project actually, like, oh, well, we got to change all this stuff around, and we don't want to break your process, kind of a thing, and make sure we get it right. Any other questions? Well, if not, thank you for coming out, even though it was the last session of the day. I'll be around, obviously, for the next couple hours or the rest of the evening if you want to talk with me. And if you have any questions about the lab or have anything cool to say about the lab, let me know. And thanks for coming out.